Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I am pruning and trellising up our tomatoes, since we do have a system that might be unfamiliar to some people. I showed it in our last garden tour, but I hadn't set up like all the strings and everything for the tomatoes, so I'm going to show you what that all looks like. And I really need to go in today and start pruning them up because I have not done much with them for the past couple of weeks and they've grown so much and they really need to be pruned. So today I'm mostly going to be showing you my indeterminate tomatoes and that whole setup, but I'm also going to be taking a look at some of my determinate tomatoes as well, just to show you what those look like. But honestly, those don't need much pruning, but I'll kind of just like show you the differences in how I approach those two types of tomatoes. I apologize in advance if it is a little bit noisy right now. We have a neighbor who's kind of obsessed with doing yard work, and he has been mowing the lawn for 6 straight hours, and this probably happens like 4 times a week. So, needless to say, our openings for recording any sound or anything like that are very few and far between, and it's just not happening for us this week. So we're gonna live with the noise, and hopefully it's not too bad and you can hear everything as I'm showing it to you. So let me go and show you the setup for the tomatoes and how they're looking right now, and then we're gonna go ahead with the pruning. Okay, so here's the setup right now for the indeterminate tomatoes. You can see I have actually already gone in and added these orange strings, and luckily they're orange so you can see them very clearly, and I'll show you a little bit closer up what they look like. But just as a quick view, the strings are attached either to the base of the plants or to a landscape staple at the base of the plants, and then they are tied up to this horizontal PVC pipe that we have up here. You can really use anything that you can get to be like that horizontal shape that you can tie a string to up top. And this is about 5 feet off the ground. You can definitely do taller if you have like taller T-posts, but we only had, I think, like 6-foot T-posts. So when you drive those into the ground, they're only sticking out of the ground 5 feet. But I found that pretty good for our indeterminate tomatoes last year. They definitely could have used an extra foot or two, but 5 feet I think is still pretty good. So I was pretty happy with that. So here's a look at one plant, for example. I have attached this string to a landscape staple at the base of the plant. And then as this plant grows, I am wrapping this orange string around the stem of the plant. So you can see I've done it up to here, but then the plant has grown probably another foot or so since I've done that. So what I need to do today is go through my plants, and I'll just take the main stem and wrap it around the string. And this will support the plant as it grows like that. So that's easy enough, but I also have to go through today and prune these tomatoes because they have a lot of suckers coming in, and I need to cut those off because pruning is really, really important for this method of trellising. And you also have to make sure that you only have one main stem that you can wrap your string around. You can't really have 2 or 3 stems on your tomato plants unless you go in and attach extra strings to wrap those stems around. But then you also get issues with airflow, which is also important for us since we live in a humid climate. So I'm going to be going around and pruning any extra stems or suckers. You can see these plants are starting to develop flowers as well, which is really nice. So this plant pretty much still just has one main stem, and it doesn't look like it's trying to produce any other stems, but I'll show you some other plants where we'll have to do some more vigorous pruning. So here's an example of one where you can see the main stem over here that's pretty thick, and then it does have 2 stems that are pretty thick. This one's actually a sucker, but it has grown for quite a while, and now it's already gotten pretty thick, and it almost looks like this plant has 2 stems. So if you let this sucker grow for too long, then it will make another stem for the plant, and that won't be supported because we are going to be wrapping this string around just one of the stems like this. So we need to make sure that we take off this sucker because, again, we just want the one stem. Another thing that I'm going to be pruning today is going up the base of the plants and pruning off any of the lower leaves. You can see that they start to yellow as the plant gets older, and also any leaves that are touching the ground can pick up fungal issues because the water will splash up off the ground and onto the plant, and you can get a lot of diseases that way. So I want to go ahead and prune off a lot of these bottom leaves. And for some of these plants, I had started off tying my string to the base of the plant like this. This is what I did last year, but I really like the method of tying it to a landscape staple, which I implemented later on as I was going down the row. I just didn't do it for these first few plants because I didn't think of it. But as I prune off these lower leaves, the string can potentially like travel up the stem. So that's why I don't really prefer to tie it to the stem. So I might redo that at some point and tie it instead to a landscape staple because I like that method better. You also then won't run into any issues with the stem getting too thick and the string kind of like impeding the growth of the stem. I did try and like tie these loops really loosely so that there's room for the stem to grow. But just FYI, I do think that the landscape staple method would work better with these, and I would recommend that. So yeah, we're gonna get to pruning, and I'll show you like a few examples of kind of like the before and after of the plants and the process of doing that whole thing. Okay, so we're gonna start with this plant, and you can see it's kind of a mess at the bottom. It does have a few extra stems coming up down here, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut those off. And then any of the lower stems I'm also gonna cut off. Probably the first like 6 inches at least of the plant, I'm gonna make sure that there are no leaves, especially these ones that like really lay towards the ground like this. I don't want anything touching the ground. And that should be pretty good for that. And I don't think there are any like big suckers up top here. Here's an example of like when the suckers are really small, what they look like. They kind of just form in like the little V of the plant here. I'm gonna go ahead and take those off while they're still small, and while they're small you can kind of just like pull them off like that, but any bigger, just go in with some shears and cut those off. You can see more flowers forming on this plant. So now that I'm done pruning this one, I can start trellising it up around this string, and that's really easy to do. All I have to do is take this main stem of the plant, which is a lot easier to see now that I've taken off a lot of those side shoots and just all that extra stuff that was going on at the bottom of the plant, and just wrap it around like this. And this one's all set to go. You can see it's nice and secure now, whereas before it was kind of just like flopping and like leaning towards the ground. Now it's really nice and secure, and as it keeps growing, we're going to keep wrapping the string around the stem like that. So this one's all set. Let's go ahead and look at another plant and do the same thing so you can see the before and after and the process. All right, so this is the next plant. Aaron's going to tackle this one.
Cut off these little guys. Here's we'll cut that off. This one's growing down. Should we cut that off?
Yeah, anything touching the ground.
Yeah.
Well, that was originally a sucker. You can see how it's like growing out of the armpit.
Yeah. Well, this was the sucker to here and here.
Yeah, and now it's so big it looks like a second stem.
And the other one just died.
Yeah, so we want to cut all those off. You can see that one was a sucker too.
Mm-hmm. This one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
want to cut that off?
Yeah, cut it off. This one was a sucker too. They get so big. Yeah.
Yeah, this one's a small one here.
Mm-hmm.
I get the small guy.
Yeah, get the small one. You're good, so now you just have to wrap the string around the stem. Yeah, you didn't wrap it around up top here though. Like that. Alright, next one. It definitely is quite a jungle in here. There's so much going on. But just start a little bit at a time. Start taking these lower ones off. Once you take off all those bottom branches, it's a lot easier to see everything that's going on. You can see so much of that main stem now. And here, you can see some tomatoes forming too. Little baby tomato there. So that's pretty cool. This is one of the ones that looks like it has 2 stems. You can see there's 2 like pretty sizable stems, and it's just because this one here was a sucker that grew so big. So I'm going to cut that one off so we only get 1 main stem. So that's pretty good for all the leaves we're going to cut off, and then Just go ahead and wrap the string around. And that one's done too. Alright, so we have finished pruning this row of our indeterminate tomatoes, and hopefully you can see the difference now, how everything is just looking a lot cleaner. There's a lot more space around the plants and a lot more airflow. And you can see how they are supported now by the string, so they will not be falling over. So yeah, everything's looking good. With this method, you do have to kind of stay on top of it. Every week or so, go in and prune off any suckers, make sure there's only one main stem growing, and wrap the string around the growing stem. But the maintenance is pretty quick. It didn't take us too long to do this row of tomatoes, and I'm very happy with the results of it. So next to our row of indeterminate tomatoes over here, we also have our determinate tomatoes, or at least a lot of them on this row here, which has a different setup. This one has a cattle panel on some T-posts. And determinate tomatoes are pretty different from indeterminate tomatoes because they do not grow as tall typically, and the way they fruit is very different as well. They tend to set a lot of their fruit all at once instead of throughout the season, so you don't actually want to prune off too many of those side stems like we just did with the indeterminate tomatoes, because those can have a lot of your potential tomatoes on them, and they might not produce more stems if you cut all of those off. For these, the main thing we need to do is just prune off those lower leaves, just to try and prevent some diseases and fungal issues. I don't really want to prune off the suckers like we did with the other one, so I'm going to let all of these grow because I do want these to get bushy, because the bushier they are, the more fruit we will get generally. So all we're going to do is pretty much go around the bottoms of these plants and maybe trim off these lower leaves that are touching the ground, and especially the ones that you know they're not going to have any stems with flowers on them, because you know these leaves are not going to be producing anything, so we can go ahead and cut those off just to help with the airflow a little bit. And then to support these, since we have the cattle panel, we can just go in and kind of like weave the plants through the cattle panel if they're tall enough to go through, and just like gently guide them in the right direction and weave them in and out. Most of them are not that tall yet, and I think these varieties generally will only get like maybe 4 feet tall, but if they are tall enough, we'll try and do that. But yeah, the main thing we're gonna do is just cleaning up the bottoms of the plants a little bit and trying to keep them a little bit more disease-free for as long as possible. I think pretty much just like that is good. I did cut off some of the lower down suckers, but all of these ones higher up I'm going to leave. So yeah, that's all there is to it, super quick. Let me show you with this plant because this one is a little bit bigger. So again, I'm just gonna cut around the lower parts of the plant. Any of the leaves that are touching the ground especially, I don't want those around. All of these like kind of downward facing leaves, I cut those off because these are not the ones that are going to produce fruit. The suckers will produce flowers and fruit, so I leave those generally. Again, just unless they are touching the ground. So that's it for that, but you can see the top is still really bushy, not like the other plants where there wasn't really much going on after we were done pruning them. This one, I think we can actually weave in here. Gotta be a little bit gentle with it. I'm just kind of like pushing it through this panel. And then in a day or so, it's gonna kind of straighten itself back out, and then I can weave it back through this panel like that and just weave it in and out. Okay, so that's all there is to it. We are done pruning our 2 rows of tomatoes. I don't think it took very long at all, probably only like 20 minutes. So it's a pretty fast job, but again, you kind of have to stick with it with tomatoes and make sure you're doing it every week and pruning off any of the areas, especially if you're getting like any yellowish spots that look like you're getting any diseases. You probably want to cut those leaves off. And with the indeterminate tomatoes, I'm going to keep wrapping those strings around, but hopefully the video kind of shows the whole process, because I know it's kind of difficult to understand what I was talking about in the last garden tour because I didn't have the strings set up yet. So hopefully with the strings set up now, it all makes sense. But yeah, that's all there is to it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.